welcome to our Hordes Dairyman monthly webinar series. My name is Abby Bauer, and I'm an associate editor for Hordes Dairyman magazine. The title of our webinar today is Mind Over Matter When Something is the Matter. Our webinars generally focus more on the cows, but today we're spending some time talking about the health and well-being of the people behind the herd. Specifically, we'll be talking about mental health and what to do when you or someone you know is in need of support. This is a very important topic that affects all of us, and we are really glad that you are here with us today. Our presenters for the webinar are Dr. Amanda Stone from Mississippi State University and Dr. Larry Tranel from Iowa State University Extension. They are both dairy specialists who have an interest in mental health and a passion for improving the lives of dairy producers, and we look forward to learning more from them today. My co-host is Mike Hutchins, a professor emeritus from the University of Illinois. Other team members working on the webinar today include our producer, Jim Baltz, and our Hordes Dairyman online media manager, Patty Hirchin. If you are listening to the presentation live, you have access to the PDF slides. You can find that in the GoToWebinar control panel down in the handout section. You can print those out if you want to follow along today and take notes or use them for future reference. Also, if you have any questions during the webinar for our presenters, you can type those into the questions section of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation. So make sure if anything pops into your head, please utilize that feature. At this time, Mike, I'll ask you to further introduce our speakers, and then we can get started on this month's webinar.
Well, very good, Abby, and thank you very much, and welcome, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce, I guess, a double header here today. We have two speakers. Our first speaker will be Dr. Amanda Stone. She is assistant professor and extension dairy specialist at Mississippi State University, and we won't mention it's over 60 degrees there today. She grew up in Pennsylvania, got her bachelor's degree at the University of Findlay, and her master's and PhD at the University of Kentucky. Immediately after graduating with her PhD, she began involved in extension work and saw issues in farm stress very early in her career. She's a certified mental health first aid instructor, and she has been able to merge her mental health knowledge to her agricultural experiences as well. Our second speaker is a good friend of mine, Dr. Larry Tranel, who grew up on a Wisconsin dairy farm. He graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Platteville and spent 10 years in the university extension system at the University of Wisconsin in Iowa County. The past 21 years, Dr. Tranel has spent as a regional field specialist at Iowa State University, especially in a number of different topics here. He also has a doctorate degree in psychology and enjoys working with farm families in overcoming mindset challenges to achieve family and farm goals. So both of you, we welcome you. And Dr. Stone, we'll turn the program over to you today.
All right. So I appreciate your introductions and for you having us, and for everyone who is in attendance. We appreciate you coming, virtually, I guess, coming. So today, Larry and I are going to talk about a lot of stuff, okay? So we're trying to condense a lot of important information into a short-ish webinar, okay? So if you have other questions, please feel free to type them in the chat or let us know after, contact us, whatever you need to do. We both truly care about this topic, and we want to get as much information to you as possible. So let's get started. Again, I'm Amanda Stone. I'm at Mississippi State University, where it is warm and no snow, so we're grateful for that. I get to work with a lot of different sectors of the dairy industry, for which I'm very grateful for that also. So I get to work with producers in my extension position. I get to work with cows and students in my research and teaching positions. And of course, I am a dairy consumer. So I think about things, and I like to think in all of those different aspects, right? Because they're all very important to understanding the industry. And the people are what we're going to focus on today. Like Dr. Hutchins said, we usually focus on the cows, but you are, I will dare say, more important than the cows that you work with, okay? So let's talk about some dairy farm differences. I'm sure several of you have gone to different dairy farms, right? Not just your own. And you know that there are a lot of different things that happen on dairy farms, right? So different herd sizes, different facilities or lack of facilities, breed preferences, Jerseys, Holsteins, family dynamics is always an interesting one to go into, right, as an outsider, to see what the dynamics are on each family farm that you go to. Management is always going to be different. And experience, right? We have some younger folks who are just coming through the ranks, and then we have some experienced farmers who have been there, done that, and had different experiences from the farmer down the road from them, right? So all of these things are different on farms. However, there are a lot of things that are the same on farms. Dairy farmers are the nicest people in the world. I would say it to anybody, and do say it to as many people as I can. They are the nicest people, no matter which farm you go to. Super hardworking, selfless. You care about your land and your animals very deeply, which creates a lot of stress, which we'll get to here in a minute, okay? You feed the world and you work hard to do that. And you're stressed, okay? And it's okay to admit that. And I know many of you are thinking, well, yeah, I'm here to learn about stress, right? So we're going to talk about that. But I want you to think about your daily interactions on the farm and your daily management on your farm, right? You worry about your animals. If you look at the last slide, the cows in that picture, and really probably the cows in this picture, are relaxed. They're comfortable. We care that they're comfortable, and we work hard to make sure that they are, sacrificing our own well-being a lot of time to enhance the well-being of these animals, okay? So we often overlooked ourselves, and I think sometimes through conversations that I have, producers do that because they don't think they have it the worst, okay? You think, well, so-and-so had a barn fire last year, so they have it way worse than me, so I don't have the right to be stressed. And that's not true, okay? Everybody is stressed. Everybody in the world experiences stress. However, you guys are getting dealt a very bad hand lately, okay? You're not alone in it, but that doesn't mean that you can't feel stressed and you can't feel not okay. It's okay to not be okay, right? There's a lot of things for you to be stressed about. You have a lot of things going on, right? Everything on this list, and you guys could probably list 100 more that aren't listed on here, okay? So a lot of these things are stressful. All of these things are stressful on good days. So they're really, really stressful whenever they start piling up on each other. And then you have other things going on outside of your business, maybe to pile up on that. Or you watched the Super Bowl last night and saw that nut juice commercial is like a popular commercial when it shouldn't be, right? So we have all of these things going on, and we need to acknowledge that they are going on, all right? Just because everyone's dealing with them doesn't mean they're not stressful. So everybody has a chapter in your life's story that you don't want to read aloud. It might be happening right now. It may have happened 10 years ago and you've come through it to the other side. You may not have experienced your worst chapter to date, okay? Everybody has difficult times. Most people don't want to talk about those times. The chapter of my life that I would like to not read aloud is when somebody in the dairy industry confided in me that they were thinking of dying by suicide, that they wanted to kill themselves, okay? And it ruled my life for a long time. And I am still processing and fixing a lot of the damage that occurred to me as a result of it, because I didn't know how to handle it at the time a few years ago. I do now, okay? And I've been since involved in similar situations that have allowed me the chance to help people who were struggling without it overtaking my own life. So even though I don't want to talk about all of this because it's heavy, okay? It's not something that I get enjoyment of saying that producers are struggling and that suicide is common. I wish that weren't the case, but we need to talk about it, okay? So I'm going to share as much of my chapters as I can with you so that hopefully that same situation doesn't happen to you where you don't know how to handle it, whether it's you or somebody else who is experiencing struggles, okay? Because it's hard. So we need to be able to have these discussions. And I will ask you, you obviously don't have to tell me, talk to yourself. What is your chapter? Are you going through it right now? So let's look in the mirror, the theoretical mirror, if you will. I know we like cows, but cats can have cheesy jokes too, because they can produce milk too, right? Get it? No, I can't see your faces, so if you're rolling your eyes, I'm sorry. That's my only cheesy joke for the day. Maybe Larry will have some for you later. But let's pause, okay, and take a look and honestly look at yourself right now, okay? How are you feeling? How is your mental health? Evaluate yourself. And you should be doing this every so often. And by every so often, I don't mean like every 2 years. I mean like every day. Do you feel great? Could you be better? Are you struggling but seeking help, which is a great thing? Or are you struggling but afraid to reach out for help or don't know how to reach out for help? Okay. You need to acknowledge that before you can help yourself or anyone else can help you. We know that farmers are super resilient. We see it all the time. That's one of the things that I love most about dairy producers and that I admire the most about them is that they are so resilient. You guys can come back from the hardest times and just keep going. And that's a great quality to have. And one of the reasons why I would hire a dairy farm kid over a city kid, because you have that and you teach that to your kids. However, we keep climbing and climbing this mountain that you can't see the end of. Okay. So you don't get an award for climbing. Okay. You have to get to the top of the mountain of whatever the task is, or just your life that you're trying to handle. Right. So I'm sure your parents taught you, and I'm sure you teach your kids that, just keep pushing or you're almost there. And I know that because I tell that to my kids too. Right. But you have to have an end. Okay. Where is the end? You can't keep climbing with no end in sight. You can, I guess, or you can get help. Most people don't know what to do when someone is having a mental health crisis. And that's part of the reason why webinars like this are getting traction right now, because unfortunately, it's a semi-common occurrence in the dairy industry, and we need to know what to do. So think about what you would do if someone was having a heart attack. You would help them, right? Even if you don't know how to do CPR, if you're not a paramedic or a doctor or anything like that, you get someone to them who can help them, okay? And that's what we need to think about from mental health too. So we as a society, I will say, that mental and physical health are so different, right? Is the heart more important than the brain? I'm going to say no, because if your brain isn't working, your body isn't working, okay? It controls everything that your body does. So it is very, very important, and we need to start treating it as such. So some signs of anxiety and depression, which are the most common mental illnesses that people struggle with, are listed here. I would bet money that you have seen these symptoms, whether in yourself or in somebody else. And Larry is going to talk more about some of the things that you can do to help get yourself feeling better if you're experiencing those. And then we'll talk about what you can do to help other people. So we need to talk about that because we need you and we need your neighbor and we need every dairy producer who is on this call and who is not on this call, okay? Too many producers are dying by suicide and it needs to end. It's not a new thing. You can read these dates up here and see that it's not something that's just been happening because of COVID or because of bad markets or anything like that. But these numbers are way too high. And a hard truth and a sad truth is that those numbers that are too high are actually lower than what they really are in real life, because accidents are not always accidents, okay? And that's hard to hear, especially if you know somebody who had a farming accident. Of course, not all farming accidents are suicide attempts, but some of them really actually are, okay? And we need to think about that. Dairy producers and farmers in general are dying by suicide at a higher rate than the general population. Some reasons for that is because we have very easy access to lethal means, guns, equipment that can hurt us, all of those things. We have little to no access to mental health care in rural areas, which of course dairy farmers are located. That's not something we're going to solve on this webinar today, but something we can think about is the tough it out culture of farming, right? You don't have to pretend like you are okay. So someone once told me this saying that rock bottom teaches you things that mountaintops never will. And you may have heard the saying before, but I'm here to tell you that you don't need to hit rock bottom to try to learn and start climbing to the top, okay? And you may need someone to throw you a rope, and that's okay. So let's stop telling people that they don't need to do this. Let's stop pretending like it's not happening. Let's stop telling people to snap out of whatever they are going through. You wouldn't tell a deaf person to listen harder. You wouldn't tell someone with a broken leg just to use the other leg and not worry about it, right? So stop doing this to people who need mental health. And let's stop pretending like it's not happening to us, even if you feel great. I'm very happy if you feel great and your mental health is just feeling perfect, right? But the whole boat is going to sink, even if there's a hole on one side, okay? It's not just someone else's problem. It is all of our problems. Oh, there we go. Okay, so let's talk about some things that we can do to help people. So mental health first aid is a course that gives people skills to help someone who is developing a mental health problem or is experiencing a mental health crisis. I am a trained instructor for mental health first aid, and we have been putting on many trainings over the last few years through AgriSafe, which is a great organization. If you don't know about them, please go to their website. And through the Promise Initiative, which is a really great group here of lots of different backgrounds and different disciplines of people who are all trying to help rural citizens with mental health struggles and opioid misuse and abuse. So this program is something that you can sign up for. And it builds mental health literacy by teaching people to understand, identify, and respond to signs of mental health crises. So we like to say that that makes you an expert noticer, okay? It does not make you a therapist, doesn't make you a psychologist, but it helps you know what to look for and then how to act on that. And I can't cover all of that in my 20-ish minutes of a talk today. The training is like an all-day thing, okay? And you still don't cover everything. But in general, this is kind of the algae action plan that Mental Health First Aid has created. Okay, so the ALGEE, not the kind of algae that you might have seen in a pond or something, right? So you're going to assess for risk of suicide or harm, which is a hard part that we're going to talk about in a second. Listen non-judgmentally, also hard sometimes. Give reassurance and information. Encourage appropriate professional help. Remember, if you don't know what to do, you're going to call someone who does, just like you would in a heart attack situation. And encourage self-help and other support strategies. So I'm going to ask you all a poll question. Dr. Hudgens, do you want to read it from here for me?
I can do that and give you a bit of a break there. Here's your first poll question. Confronting a person about suicide could upset them more and thus increase the risk of suicide. Is that statement true or false? So here's your chance to vote, and the voting lines are open. And the votes are coming in, and we're almost at 50%. Abby, do you want to vote on this? Kind of interesting question.
It is. I mean, Mike, these are obviously really tough situations, and each one is so different. You know, I think I would answer this question as false. You know, in thinking that if you approach somebody, if they know someone cares, it could make the difference between a life or death choice potentially. So that would be my answer.
Okay, very interesting. I'm not sure how I would vote on it either. Kind of, that's a challenging one. Jim, let's close the poll. We got 70% of the people in. And Amanda, what do you think of the answers? You may want to discuss this question. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. So 32% of you said it was true and 68% said it was false. I'm with Abby, and she actually explained it perfectly how I was going to do it. And she didn't cheat. I didn't go over this with her ahead of time. She's just that smart. But it is false. Okay. So there's a common misconception, though, and I get told this by a lot of people, that sometimes people are afraid to confront someone who they think might be experiencing a mental health crisis. They don't want to ask the question. And they say that it's because they don't want them to be more likely, they don't want to make that person more likely to do it. But the real reason is they're afraid to hear the answer, okay? Coming from someone who have had several conversations about people wanting to die by suicide, it is really, really hard to hear that yes answer, okay? And if you don't know what you're going to do, if you hear the yes, that's part of where these like mental health first aid trainings or QPR trainings can come into play, where it helps guide you through that so that you have practice saying, are you thinking about dying by suicide? Are you thinking of harming yourself? Those questions, you need to say them before you are in that situation when the stress is a little bit lower. So you all did well on that one. So Dr. Hudgens, we have another one here.
Okay, here's another one coming. Get ready to vote. The question is, suicidal people mostly keep their plans to themselves until it is too late. So is that true or false? I think I know how I'm going to vote on this one, Abby, but what's your take on this one?
Mike, I think I would say false, with the assumption that there a lot of times could be some signs, even if they're subtle. What do you think, Mike?
I was gonna go true. So obviously one of us is gonna be wrong and one of us is gonna be right. So that's good. That's kind of like straddling the fence. Anyway, we got about 67% of the vote in. And Jim, let's share it and see what Amanda has to say. And look at that. This will be interesting.
Yeah.
Amanda,
So
what do you think of the vote?
Dr. Hudgens and Abby, you were about right, 50-50, and that's what our results are. So 44% said that's true and 56% said that is false. So suicidal people, or people who are thinking about killing themselves, do not mostly keep their plans to themselves. So this is false. It's the correct answer. And like you mentioned, Abby, is that sometimes we don't see those signs, but that doesn't mean that they're not there, okay? So they are giving us signs that we'll talk about here right now. So some are going to be direct verbal warnings, right? Some people are going to just come out and say it. If such and such doesn't happen, I'm going to kill myself. Or I wish that I were dead, right? Even if they're posed in a seemingly joking manner, still take them seriously. All right, so the more signs or symptoms that you see, the greater the risk, but I want you to take all of the signs seriously and act on them, okay? So talking about suicide or preoccupied with death in general is a suicide warning sign, whether it be with animals, whether it be with other people, whether it be another farmer who did it and they just can't stop talking about it. Anxious and depressed are going to be some signs. Changes in sleep and eating, and that could be more sleep or less sleep, more eating or less eating, okay? Substance abuse or misuse. Previous suicide attempts are going to make somebody more likely to attempt again in the future. Getting a gun or stockpiling pills, co-occurring mental illnesses that you may or may not know about or that may or may not actually be diagnosed. Putting their personal affairs in order. If you know that people are starting to get more life insurance and making sure that somebody's going to be able to come milk their cows if anything happens to them, that is a sign. In giving away their prized possessions. Sudden interest or disinterest in religion is a sign. Drug or alcohol abuse or relapse after a period of recovery. Unexplained anger, aggression, and irritability, which, let's be real, we're all sometimes irritable. So I'm not talking about just the normal, maybe sassiness, as I call it with my kids, right? But I'm talking about unexplained, okay? And all of these things can happen for a variety of reasons, lots of major life changes, right? And lots of reasons for those, okay? Financial problems is a huge major life situation that can cause somebody to feel like they need to make this choice, okay? So when in doubt, you have to ask the question. If you're not in doubt and you really think that they might be thinking about trying to kill themselves, you need to ask, are you thinking about killing yourself? But you need to be ready to hear the answer, okay? Let that person talk freely. Try not to be judgmental. Try to say what you think will help them, but don't try to make it seem like it's not a big deal, okay? Because it is, and they might actually go through with it, okay? Give yourself lots of time to talk. Keep following up with that person. If they're not ready to talk to you, that's okay. You might not be that person that they feel comfortable enough to talk to. That's okay, but get them to that person, okay? Have resources handy. So have the National Suicide Hotline number programmed in your phone if you need it. Have a magnet on your refrigerator. Don't make threats to them or send them on a guilt trip. Don't tell them that they're going to go to hell if they try to die by suicide. We hear that one very often. That's not going to help them feel any better, okay? They are already in a very deep, dark despair. So sending them on guilt trips or making them feel worse is not going to help them, all right? And we can go, again, on and on about this. And Larry is going to go into a little bit more about how to help yourself if you're feeling that way. But again, those mental health first aid trainings would be really useful to go more in depth into that. And here are some partners. Again, the Promise Initiative and AgriSafe are really, really great groups. I'm grateful to work with them. And here's my contact information if you have any other questions. So I'll pass it to Dr. Hutchins and then to Larry.
Okay, very good. Amanda, sounds great. Dr. Trendle, the show is yours. So take it away. Bring your PowerPoints up.
Okay, so you can see my screen. So welcome to everybody again. Appreciate Amanda's presentation there. So I'm going to talk more about farm stress and distress and actually the arrow in between. So we talk a lot about farm stress with communication strategies, different types of, just what causes stress and things like that. We also have on the flip side there, as Amanda talked about, the suicide, we've got anxiety, we got depression, we've got exhaustion, we got trauma. But again, that arrow in between is what are some mindset tactics and that we can use to increase our brain health and some behavioral well-being as we just the way we think of things can actually help us reduce stress. And that's what I want to target at today. So as we take a look at, what stress looks like, everybody thinks about stress as being bad. And in some respects, I think we need to start thinking that stress is actually good in our lives. And without it, we probably wouldn't get to where we want to go in life. But when we take a look at spelling this word stress backwards, if you take a look at it and just try to read it backwards, it actually spells desserts. So I want you to think about stress in some respects as actually a positive thing within our lives. And sometimes after we look at our lives and we kind of think back, that bad thing that happened was actually kind of a backwards blessing to us. So again, bottom line, but you did hear what I said, so I'm not going to repeat that. But again, stress spelled backwards is desserts, and a lot of things what happen within our lives can actually be a backwards blessing to us. And again, I'm trying to get after this mindset of trying to think more positively about some of the things that happen within our lives. So as we take a look at life itself, as we know, it's full of difficulty. A lot of different philosophies around the world just realize that that's a basics of life. It's full of chaos. It gets into our relationships, into our finances, and it gets into our time. So when people think that life should be stress-free and fat-free and illness-free, money-free, grief-free, okay, they just think should be a pleasurable thing. But we realize life is difficult, okay? So it's not always going to be those things. So our goal is to try to put that chaos, put our lives in order and overcome those difficulties in our life. And that's how we grow to higher meaning. And so bottom line is that we need to acknowledge, first of all, that life is difficult. It's a part of life. Okay, when we talk about keeping our room clean, it's just, try to clean up one thing on the farm, one thing within our house, and just do that daily if our life is full of chaos. But I think even more importantly, there's great research out there about for us to make a to-be list. Who do you want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years down the road? And I think that's probably more important than our to-do list. When we think about stress and how we handle stress, it's pretty important to our psyche. So out of a 30,000 person study, there was a 43% increase in dying from stress, but it's only for those who reported being under stress that also thought that stress was bad. For those who didn't think that stress was bad, there wasn't a difference. Okay, it's a mindset thing. So simply believing that stress is bad for us increases the risk of death. So farmers, and this is one of my concerns, is all this talk about farm stress, that we think that all stress is bad when it isn't, okay, because that's what we tell them. So this attention to the negativity of stress might also increase our emotionality to the stress, what actually might cause more stress. Okay, that's my concern. So those who think that stress is bad have increased heart rate and blood vessel constriction. And that's the tough part, because that's our cortisol working. Okay, those that think stress is good, we still have the increased heart rate, but the blood vessels stay relaxed just in the same respect as if we're experiencing joy and courage. And I think that's important. The confidence part of that from Kelly McGuganall, Stanford University psychologist. So acknowledging stress as good is good. The stress is not so good. So again, that's that arrow in between. How do we keep from not getting there? So we have this tale of two minds, okay? We have this protective mind on the left side, which is either going to put us, when stress happens or anything happens in our life, it puts us into flight or fight mode, okay? We get increased volatility or we might withdraw versus our prefrontal cortex, the front part of our brain, with that brain of higher reasoning. That's what we want to work with when we get under stress. So what you got to do when stress comes for you? It's a mindset thing. So the mind that wins is the mind that we feed. Okay, so this primitive mind has been with us for millions and millions of years. It magnifies risk. It puts us in protective mode. It makes us more hesitative. It gives us more guilt, shame, fear, impulses where we're acting kind of on short-term type things. It's a protector, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that we need to overcome it and deal with it. And it negatively is exhibited in a lot of our minds. And then that's versus that prefrontal cortex, that mind of higher reasoning. And that prefrontal cortex is actually cut off from operating all unnecessary function when we're in this primitive or protective mind zone. Okay, we focus on all these threats when we're in that protective mind. So I think one of the solutions to distress is often minds apart, and I say that very literally. So the tale of these two minds, when anytime we have mental or physical risk, we instinctively go in protective mode. We want to protect ourselves. We focus overwhelmingly on the risks, and sadly, we often become overwhelmed by the risk because we can't think through them. We refrain from higher purpose reasoning, and one of the toughest parts, we often self-defeat ourselves and self-defeat our good behaviors because of this protective mind trying to protect ourselves. So we avoid, and research shows this out, we avoid possible pain much more than seeking better gain. So again, that prefrontal cortex, let's seek that better gain. So how do we use the best of both minds? It took me a long time as a dairy breeder to breed this cow, but we finally got it done. But inside our minds is this internal conflict. We're off to the races with our prefrontal cortex, want to do things, but this protective mind is holding us back. But the key thing is that we can actually trick or hack or hijack, whatever term you want to use, to better deal with stress, so we can hijack our minds to do that. So coming out of this mouth, instead of, when we get under a lot of emotion or a protective mindset type thing, let's count backwards. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Make this part of our brain actually think, or even a tougher one. Sometimes I try to use the ZYXWV because it's more difficult for me. But again, we can trick our minds to get that higher level reasoning. I love this graph when we talk about the human function curve, because there is such a thing as good stress. And I can have a lot of good stress in my life, and I can perform very well, and I'm aroused by it. Okay, it increases my performance. But we also have in the green line here, we have this comfort zone. And in this comfort zone, we can also take a look at when we start moving beyond it, what happens? Yes, we can increase our performance, but there's this tension. And we think about this curve as kind of a rubber band. And that act of stretching is actually growth, and it's good when we first start stretching the rubber band. But it gets to the point where it's straining or breakage. As we get to the right side, experience more distress, that rubber band can actually break with trauma, exhaustion, grief, ill health, and a few things like that. So the tip is that some stress is undoubtedly good. Too much is not, and where's their comfort zone? So when we take a look at resiliency, look at that the comfort zone, that resiliency can actually be stretched in each of our lives by simply learning mindset tactics. And I'm going to try to share just a few ones that have really helped me out a lot over my life. So that human function curve, we're always taught to think outside the box. But when we take a look at the goal is optimal human function in the comfort zone, not at our highest performance. Because yes, we can always continue to push ourselves for more and more performance, but at what cost? And that cost is often living beyond the margins of time, our own energy, our mental focus, which really impacts our brain health. And it gets into our relationships, our care for ourselves, and that really gets into our behavioral health. So we need to operate inside the box, within the margins, even if we're thinking outside the box. So we realize that there's a neuron code that can change thought. We can change the code and we can change the emotion. And our brain exhibits a lot of different emotions in a lot of different areas of our brain with each emotion. So families who reinterpret, and reinterpret is the big word of the day. We need to hijack, hack, reinterpret, whatever we call it. Initial negative situations, the more positive meanings. These families, these individuals are more likely to be in control of their stressors. They stretched out that comfort zone, increase their resiliency. They find possible solutions to crisis situations because they're using their prefrontal cortex more. And they adapt well eventually to the crisis. Okay, again, the increased resiliency. So one of the simple things we have is we have a lot of people walking around with some very negative facials on their face. And that really impacts their brain health. We take a look at disgust. Okay, when you have that look at disgust, and some people carry this around their whole life, the hormone release of cortisol, the attitude towards the source tends to be negative. We tend to have more negative behaviors when we have this look at disgust on our minds. We also have this distrust. And when you're in the dairy industry, we don't trust the markets, we don't trust the systems, maybe we don't trust ourselves, the spouse, the kids, or others to do the right thing. And the third one is the frown. You know, smiling is actually one of the most researched facial expressions there is. And yet we still take a look at so many frowns on so many people's faces. And when we have these negative facials, it gets us in protective mode. And that's what's happening. So we have more difficulty planning, communicating, more negative relationships, tougher making decisions with these negative facials. So the way that we face stress can better help us face stress. It's extremely important, as simple as it might sound. So we think about the smile, to be like a proton, be positive and smile. So I had this little BS minute. This is kind of my go-to thing. When I get under a lot of stress, boy, I can go to this thing and I can snap out of it actually pretty good. Some nights when I can't sleep, I just think about this and I try to do it, and it works for me. So maybe it'll work for you too. So whether you're laying, sitting, reclining, standing in a relaxing position, and even if you're not, it still works. Eyes open or closed. Try to think of something positive. Try to sublime and trade negative situations for more positive thoughts. Breathe in slowly, fake smiling as we do, and then breathe out slowly, fake smiling to the bottom of our breath. And then I want you to chuckle or actually fake laugh at the bottom of the breath. And we continue to do this, breathing deeper, smiling wider, and chuckling more each time for a total 1 minute. Okay, and what happens when we do? We realize that smiling and laughter has a mimic reflection. It's contagious with other people. It's contagious within ourselves as well. We can make it more of a habit. So when we do this, people tend to report feeling better, more relaxed, less stressed, that the smiling continues shortly thereafter. Again, it's a habit. Having more energy and more enthusiasm afterwards as well. And that frowning was actually more difficult shortly after. And if it didn't, try doing the exercise again and try to frown immediately after. And then facial disgust was also more difficult shortly after. And again, if it wasn't, if you try this, do it again and see if it happens. But the bottom line is that overall well-being increased shortly after. So how do we snap out of a situation like this? And I realize when people are in some dire stress, it is very difficult to even say the word, try to snap out of it, and it's not good for us to actually say that. So the BS minute, I think, is anything but BS. It really increases serotonin within our minds and within our bodies. So the second one, and this is a big one, posturing your life for success. It's a physical thing as much as it is any planning, because the neurochemistry of victory and defeat, or success or failure, whatever you want to call it, can either be very self-promoting in your life or very self-defeating. And it's often dependent on one's postural flexion, our posture reaction to different types of things. So just like smiling, it increases serotonin. And so how do we have a look up and stand tall posture with the shoulders back? Because it definitely increases serotonin. And it drops when we feel defeated, when we look down, when we feel threatened, or we're just stooping over, we just feel hurt, anxious, or weak. Okay, and it's a natural reaction. But how do we posture ourselves for more success? So if you want to truly lower your attitude and your social status and have it happen quickly, just lower your posture. It will happen automatically. So the other thing I tend to do sometimes is this 2-minute power pose. You look like the Incredible Hulk, and it increases serotonin, testosterone, it will reduce cortisol. and even make a grunt as you do it. And even if you can't do it for 2 minutes, even for 5, 10, 15 seconds, tends to have a positive impact. So how do we take care of self and our prospective situation in life? The bottom line is that there are some people that take better care of their pets, their crops, their livestock than they care for themselves. They're their own worst employee if they're working for themselves, and their own boss if they're telling themselves what to do. Some people wallow in self-pity even when things are good. Some people treat others with more respect than themselves. Some people amplify their suffering and their stress just for attention or by branding it as some type of an injustice, whether it be the unfair markets or this respect they get in society. Some people refuse to strive to improve, and we realize from a psychological standpoint that neutral is not good. As humans, we need to keep moving and improving. So don't be these some people, because these some people are not happy no matter what. So in order to improve, we must have desire, admit there's a problem, no doubt. Take responsibility for one's life or for the problem, act accordingly. And again, this is very difficult when somebody gets themselves in some distress because their concentration level, their ability to make decisions and communicate really starts to dwindle. And so if they can't act accordingly for themselves, that's when I try to write things down for them, because their mind sometimes might not be able to do that for themselves. And then get help if needed. So try to be proactive, not passive. And if they're in the mindset where they're so far in exhaustion and distress, then get the help for them, because they probably can't get that themselves. So neutral, like I said, is not associated with personal growth or happiness. So it might work harder just to try to maintain the same level of success in our lives, but just keeping one's life or one's finances above water is a positive. It's not neutral, it's actually positive. So the brain health is tied to the heart. Okay, so I think it's important for us to realize that oxytocin, and we as dairy people, we know this as the milk letdown hormone. Okay, but as human beings, it also fine-tunes close relationships, empathy, the help and support for people that one cares about, and it goes both ways. We also realize that it's a stress hormone that pumps out as much adrenaline when under stress that actually motivates people to seek support and tell someone how you feel. Okay, so again, it's a good stress response. Psychologist Kelly Mugugino. Brain health, when we take a look at loneliness on the flip side, is that loneliness equates to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So stay close to people based on some UK research. Oxytocin protects the body, helps strengthen and repair it. It helps us feel closer to others, and when we do, more oxytocin is released. So oxytocin itself, that bonding component, has a farm stress resiliency component. It's a stress response. So oxytocin can help you put you in a better mood. I put that one in there for Dr. Hutchins. So a happy tip is to do something. Are you going to do something for others? Because when you do something for others, it actually has a very positive response in our stress levels. We can do something for the planet, and the response isn't quite so good. Okay, but it's still positive. Or we can focus solely on doing something for ourselves. And this research project showed that there wasn't much benefit. The benefit was doing things for other people. So take care of self. We don't want to diminish that, but don't just focus on yourself. Stay involved helping other people. Brain health is tied to routine as well, because it's necessary to help make better decisions. And when we take a look at people that suffer from anxiety and depression, is that the sufferer, it's tough to do that if they have unpredictable daily routines, because it's tied to those biological rhythms each and every day. And so that's important for us to keep. So start your day with routine, schedule routine into your day. So when we take a look at getting up at the same time, starting that daily routine, one of the things I think from Dr. Jordan Peterson, clinical psychologist, to eat a protein and fat breakfast when we get up, before we do some heavy exercising or very heavy work, because that hyperinsulin spike that can actually happen from burning sugars or eating a lot of processed carbs and sugars for breakfast. Okay, so don't eat those simple carbs and sugars for breakfast, because we can actually become psychologically unstable all day. So that system can't be reset until we get more sleep. So the brain health is undoubtedly tied to the gut health. It's heavily impacted by diet. Serotonin, when we talk about that happy hormone, it's 90 to 95% secreted by the gut, only 5 to 10% by the brain. People are surprised at that. So bottom line is turn the news off while eating, maybe turn it off anyway, but mild stress can really tip gut microbial balance, Okay, it makes us more vulnerable, has us more nervous reaction, nervous system feedback to the brain. So know your gut feeling is heavily cooperating with your brain, and it's helping you regulate both mood and cognition. So processed carbs, added sugar is a big pet peeve of mine. The sugar that we eat in 7 hours is what a person in 1822 ate in 5 days. So we're eating 3 to 4 times too much sugar in a lot of our diets. So much like cocaine, sugar is addictive. Those brain receptors release dopamine, creating more receptors for dopamine, thus craving it even more. And so the bottom line is that extra sugar spikes these insulin levels. Insulin, weight gain, they go hand in hand. And so your brain on too much sugar, it's pretty clear that that excessive glucose in the form of refined sugar can be very detrimental to your brain, ultimately affecting your attention span, short-term memory, and I think the most important one is that mood stability. So leptin, a protein hormone, when we have too much added sugars, processed carbs, it gives a signal for satiety, which means that for being full, and that suppresses that. So one then blindly eats more without feeling full, and I'd like to say one is often blind to the robber until we're robbed blind, which is a fat truth. The stress also causes high cortisol release, causing craving of pleasurable food intake, especially added sugars and unprocessed carbohydrates that turn into those simple sugars. Less sleep can also initiate the craving, spiking that insulin. So again, one is often blind to the robber until one's robbed blind. It's a sugary truth as well. And so when we take a look at brain health, I'm starting to see more and more of how brain health in people's families, and not so much on the farmers themselves, but in their families, is tied to the smartphone use. So that dopamine rewards the users with each like, each post, each search. It gets very addictive that people just do not understand. So it can be as addictive as a slot machine, providing excessive stimulation, increased emotionality, decreased real social interaction, and can actually move us into distress with those constant interruptions and those notifications. Every 6 minutes, we get a dopamine release, just unending searches and this both real and false spectacles of life. So the natural rhythms of the brain are interrupted on average by every 6 to 12 minutes for most people, with so many struggling to even go 10 minutes without the phone. Okay, so I'm talking about smartphones, not so much flip phones. So one is often blind to the robber until we're robbed blind. It's a smartphone truth as well. So those that are constantly connected, they're more stressed. From Pew Research, University of Missouri, feel lonelier. They're more likely to experience depression and a sleep disorder. And regular use of social media increase the likelihood of both envy and depression. It is not a positive thing. So smartphone overuse can reduce performance. And I think about it, using it in our jobs on the farm, it can increase performance in a lot of ways as well. But there's certain ways it actually reduces our performance, our social interaction, our sleep, our mental health. Can increase the stress, anxiety, depression, envy, other mindsets. So simple things, whether it be sugar, smartphone use, or routine, simple things that can cause us to have more stress, whether it be on the farm or not. So using that phone to get a feel-good dopamine response and needing more and more of it each time just to get the same level of response. And then we find out it's not there. So that can end in some negative emotion and then more anxiety, depression, and again, false reality. So don't let the family relationships hide behind these screens, because it's really harping and hampering a lot of, I think, family relationships. So I say farm families, sometimes we might need a digital detox. Okay, limiting this time off, disabling notifications. Make sure that family is before phone, because it's stealing the attention, a lot of real moments that families experience. Those smartphones need their places. And yes, they have a good place in our lives, but that blue light inhibits melatonin, both reducing quality and quantity of sleep. So again, maybe at night, get them out of sight, out of mind. But so many people, and especially kids, are sleeping with their phones. So smartphones are second to relationships. Okay, how do we get that dopamine face to face? Because there's a lot of positive relationship there. When I walk into a classroom nowadays, I have to put my head down. Just when people they're into their phone, you try to start conversations, very difficult to do. They're not even talking to the neighbor student that they're standing there with, and just how that smartphone has changed the impact of the classroom when you walk in there. So being bored is more important than checking this phone every 5 minutes. And why do I say that? Because kids especially, but grown-ups as well, we don't have enough margin free time to just be bored. And what happens while we're bored? We tend to get more creative. Our thought processes tend to be a little bit better, decision-making skills. We're not always thinking somebody else's thought. So being bored is more important than get the excitement from that smartphone. So as I start to sum up here, be mindful of the present, breathe, smile, especially smile, and stand tall. Take care of yourself and have respect for yourself. Be proactive and be responsible for both yourself, your life, and for others as well. Realize that life's value goes well beyond the farm. You know, the farm is the all for some people, just to realize there's more in life than just the farm. Leave the pity parties to attend to higher virtues, higher values, higher reasoning in our prefrontal cortex, and swap out those processed carbs and those added sugars. We realize that sugars are an important part of the diet. So are carbohydrates. Not that much different from a dairy cow diet. Okay, but how do we take all that added sugar and the added carbs that we do not need for our bodily maintenance and get them out of there? And don't let screen time deplete your dream time. Have that time to process and create and be creative. Generosity, gratitude, increase those happy hormones. And again, what we do for others tends to increase our happiness. So as we take a look at different types of things that we think about stress, how do we think more positively about stress? All those communication, different types of things that we take a look at, strategies. There's a handout that's, I think, is maybe in the box somewhere that people can get at, that actually goes through, it's 12 pages of different types of things on communication skills, identifying stress, this, that, or the other thing. Also deals with grief and loss and those things as well. But the bottom line is stress is good. Distress is not good. It's that arrow in between that we want to make sure doesn't take our stress too far into exhaustion and trauma that we want to try to work with. And that's basically why these mindset tactics for brain health and behavioral well-being are so very important. And sometimes they're so simple. But I try a lot of these mindset tactics, and I'm just trying to present a few of them that have really worked for me and really worked for some other people that I've been dealing with. So with that, we'll leave it at that, and we'll thank you for joining with today's webinar. And I think Amanda's going to take.
Thank you. Thank you both, Larry and Amanda, for sharing your stories and advice with us today. While a farming career offers so many rewards, it's also an extremely challenging way of life. And then when you add a global health pandemic into the mix and all the financial ups and downs, we know that people can really feel emotionally and mentally stressed, both professionally and personally. So the information that you shared today could really make a difference in someone's life. So we appreciate that. And again, we appreciate all of you in the audience for joining in today. I think as Amanda had said, you know, you really are more important than the cows, and you can't take care of your animals or other people if you don't take care of yourselves. So I appreciate the tips that you both shared to help people and also help ourselves get in a more positive mindset. If you have any questions for our speakers, please type them into the questions section of the GoToWebinar panel right now. And in a few minutes, we will have an opportunity to answer those questions. Also, if you would like to view this webinar again or share it with anyone else, it will be posted online later this week. You can find this webinar and all of our other webinars available at www.fords.com. So please check them out there. And then Larry, if you could advance the slide once. I want to invite you to our future webinars that are coming up. We always hold our webinars the second Monday of the month at noon Central Time. In March, our webinar will be titled Clean Cows Make Clean Milk, and we'll have the opportunity to hear from Jim Davenport, who is a New York dairy farmer and a board member of the National Mastitis Council. Jim's farm has earned the Platinum Award in the National Mastitis Council's Milk Quality Contest more than any other farm in the nation. So we look forward to hearing from him and learning about what they do to ship high quality milk every day from their dairy farm. And then in April, our very own Mike Hutchins will be our presenter, and he'll be talking about the current feed prices and what you can do to improve margins when corn is at $5 and soybean meal is at $450 per ton. So we look forward to Mike's presentation in April. Now, if you can move the slide once more, we had a few questions that came in ahead of time and then a few that came in during the presentation. So Mike, would you go through these with our speakers right now?
You bet. Very good, Abby. I'll break this into two parts. The first question is, what are examples of successful farmer stress programming that you've seen, and what doesn't work? So, Amanda, do you want to start out on that one?
Yeah, sure. So I think that what Larry went over is all very important and things that you can apply, but I think what we need to focus on is what works for us, right? So try anything that you can. And so I've seen a lot of different stress programs, if you will, that can help people get through that. But also remember that if you're not getting through it and you're still struggling, it's okay to ask for help, okay? To get somebody else to help you, to talk to a therapist, to talk to a friend, to get someone to help you. Larry, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just think there's a lot of universities that have a lot of great farm stress programming. And I think they're pretty important. And I think I was kind of focusing on what doesn't work. And I think of all the farm stress programs that I've seen so far, I haven't seen any of them that I don't think don't work. And I think about the only time we do it is if we when you take a look, most of us are very closely tied to the farmers, and just, when you take a look at farm stress, it really is important that people understand the stresses that farmers are under when they try to help them, especially in the counseling or even the clinical situation and dealing with it.
Yeah.
Let's go to our second question then, on the same one that came from Wisconsin. What training do you recommend people, Larry, take who work with farmers?
I think one of the ones that Amanda actually mentioned is the mental health first aid. I think is a very nice one for them to work with. And I would also add into that the QPR, question, persuade, refer, which is more of a suicide prevention type one. So we've got both the mental health and trying to help them through depression, anxiety, and just identifying type stress. But I think that QPR program is a very important one as well.
Amanda, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think that the first question kind of led into the second question, that mental health first aid and QPR are really great trainings, have been shown through research to be successful in what they are tasking people to do with them. So if you can find one in your area, or, well, now everything is online, it seems like, then please take advantage of it. And many times you don't even have to pay for them, but also it doesn't have to be somebody who just works in extension or is a professor or an industry representative, right? People who are around farmers, whether you are the wife of a farmer, the husband of a farmer, the child of a farmer, right? All of you are working with farmers. So please don't just leave it up to everybody else to take those trainings, because you can take them also.
We have another question. Go ahead, Larry.
I was just going to say, Extension in Iowa, we're actually doing a Mississippi State's a partner with us in this. We're actually doing a 4-part webinar series to help kind of train both farmers and people just on a lot of different aspects of stress. So it's going to be happening in March. If people are interested in that, they can make some contacts to us.
And Larry, where would they find the contacts? Through Extension, or how would they find that?
Actually, we're going through a lot of the churches with it as well, but they can make a contact myself. Amanda's going to be a part of that as well. So through Extension at Iowa State University, our dairy team is probably going to be the host lead.
Okay, very good. We have a very long question. I'm going to get it down to, and Larry, let's move a PowerPoint one more, or I can click forward one more PowerPoint, Larry, while I read this condensed list. It has to do with farm sitters. And a family had a real tough situation here in which they had some really serious health problems here, requiring people to be in hospitals and therefore had to be away from the farm. And all the cows basically 2/3 of the cows got mastitis because of the people that had to take care of them. And they've looked everywhere, tried to find out, various sources. So her question is, or his question is, what's a reliable, affordable network for help to solve this potential problems that farmers face when they just have to leave the farm due to either a number of different reasons?
And I'm going to say we don't have an easy answer to that, but I think it just kind of really magnifies another stress that farmers have. Is just we have so little control. When you start taking a look at just the labor, and it's not just labor, but it's high quality labor to try to take care of it while we might be gone, and that's part of the issue of, farmers even trying to get a little time for themselves, to deal with their own mental health, just because of all these stressors that come into it. So I apologize that I don't have an answer of, how do you take care of it, but it really does magnify how big these issues are on the farm with their farm stress, and how different it is from a lot of other people that they deal with in their communities.
Amanda, do you have any comment to that?
I wish that I had something else to say about it, but that's exactly how I would answer that question too, is there's not a great network for it, unfortunately, and it's a real issue and causes a lot of stress.
Well, let me challenge you two experts. Basically, we have hospice for people who have serious health problems, but nothing for those in agriculture. Is there an opportunity to form an organization or something like that, or what should we be doing?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. I don't know how we would tackle it, but surely there is a need for it. So maybe that is something that we can explore and find ways to help people with it. But nobody's ever going to take care of your cows as well as you are, right? No matter who you are. So those 2/3 mastitis problems, those things are going to come up regardless of who is caring for them, unfortunately. But there is a need for it. So I think that's a great idea.
It's interesting. One person just typed in, "What about milk co-ops?" I mean, maybe we're seeing this in the police part, trying to help mental challenges. Well, what about our milk co-ops? Do they have should they be maybe the focal point, that they have a program or people hired to do that?
I'll just jump in. I guess one of the things that we're starting to see, and that's part of that webinar series we're putting in, is that we're trying to expand the conversation of mental health, and as we hope that once we get this conversation actually expounded upon, just what's going to happen from there. So we do have, actually, I know one milk co-op that's actually taken a look at, some of their farmers and some of their stress. When we take a look at what can we do here, I think now that we get the conversation started, I think those conversations about now what can we do further to actually help situations like this can actually come to the forefront. Might not have, again, easy answers, but at least that conversation's getting started, and we're trying to see if we can do something or not.
Okay. If you got other comments, I'll let you guys jump in. But here's another comment that came in and said, we're using this from North Carolina, using a farm theater here, but it's very tough to do virtually. And they're also looking at groups, farmer to farmer and peer group farmer groups, to try to put more attention on mental health. First aid here in North Carolina. So any comments on that type of our approach?
I love that you're doing that. I think that is awesome, and would encourage you to continue and seek out any opportunities that you can for that. And I think the farmer to farmer groups are very important. Like, you can listen to those of us who have PhDs or PsychDs or whatever all day, right? And we can tell you the research and the reasoning behind things. But talking to your fellow farmers who truly are in a very, very similar situation as you is going to be a whole different ballgame, right? They're going to understand you better than even we will that study this area. So it's really important to do that and to talk with other producers. And chances are, whoever you bring this up to is experiencing the same thing. So don't be afraid to do that. That's awesome.
And I think that's part of our goal with the webinars too, is that we would actually get together, whether it be in churches or agribusiness. I know a few banks that are actually doing it, to actually bring their farmers together to again, get the conversation started.
Another question came in as, how do you deal with an aggressive personality person who really doesn't want to hear that what you think you can help them with to deal with overcoming farm stress?
So we get this question a lot. Larry, do you want to answer it? Go ahead.
Well, go ahead. You started. That's good.
Yeah. So I think it's a very interesting question, because it comes up so often, is that, if somebody doesn't want help, you cannot help them. Okay. And that's not on you. So whenever, through my 20 minutes, I was telling you, you need to reach out to people, you need to help people, right? Because we do. And I firmly believe that we do. However, we can't save everyone. And that's part of what I talked to you about, that my life kind of became a turmoil situation when someone confided in me that they wanted to die by suicide. And the reason for that is because I didn't know how to handle it. And I put all of that responsibility for that person's life on my shoulders. Someone else's life is not your responsibility. Our responsibility as humans and as helpers is to help people, right? But you are not responsible for that person. So you need to continue to be persistent and help them as much as you can. But there needs to be a balance there to not let it take over your own life in trying to help them.
Yeah, I
Larry, you want to
100%
comment?
agree with what Amanda said there. Just, different farmers have different personalities, positivity, negativity, and things like that. And just if you can start, going in slow ways and try to, first of all, in a friendly way, to, make some suggestions. And I think a lot of the trainings that, whether it be mental health first aid or the QPR, actually bring a lot of suggestions in how to help somebody like that. So I would highly encourage those trainings. Are very low cost, and some not even having a cost. But I think very important for people to have.
Here's our last question, Larry. We'll let you take the first swing at it. Healthcare or lack thereof can be stressful. Do you have any recommendations for finding healthcare for farm families, especially healthcare that would include some of the emotional things we talked about here today?
Yeah, I think the sad reality is that there's some of the healthcare plans that don't even include mental health counseling with them. So we realize how big of a healthcare issue it is just getting healthcare itself. But on the psychological counseling type side, it's even more and more difficult because, like I said, because of those plans don't have it. So the more we can group together, work through farm organizations to try to work with farmers and try to specialize in that healthcare is about the best answer I can give, because I realize how difficult that is. And a lot of them can't afford it even if it was there, which is another issue all to itself.
Dr. Stone, do you have any closing comments on that question?
Nope, unfortunately, I don't have any other resources for it, but it's definitely an issue.
Well, very good. I'm going to turn the program back over to Abby here to wind up today's program. And so, Abby, we'll turn it back to you.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Stone and Dr. Trainell, for your presentation and then for answering these questions at the end of the session. We really appreciate all of your insight. And again, the information that you're sharing and the passion you have for dairy farmers really, can truly make a difference. So thank you for spending your hour with us today and the prep work you did beforehand. If you could move the slide one ahead. I just want to remind you again of our upcoming webinars. Next month in March, we'll be focusing on milk quality and have a presentation by New York dairy farmer Jim Davenport. And then in April, we'll have a feeding topic, and Dr. Hutchins will be talking about the current corn and soybean prices and what you can do to maneuver around feed when the prices start climbing as they are now. So we look forward to those presentations. And then, as always, I want to thank all of you who are listening today for joining us. And we know you have busy schedules, so we appreciate you spending some time with us each month. And in specifically talking about this topic, by educating yourselves in the area of mental health, you'll be better equipped to help yourself or someone else if the need arises. So we really appreciate all the work you do on a daily basis, and we want to make sure that everyone in our farming community is healthy both mentally and physically and can be able to continue to do their jobs and enjoy their lives. So we appreciate you taking time to join us and learn a little bit more about this important topic. So until next time, goodbye from all of us here at Hoard's Dairyman and the University of Illinois, and please take care.